what does great look like? The greatest predictor of an engaged employee is their engaged boss. All of us are smarter than any of us.
If you're judging, you're not learning.
You're smart, you care, you're not mind readers. People like to be asked if you're going to do something about it. They may not get it right the first time, but it is so worth your time.
Today, I'm thrilled to have Dave Garrison, a powerhouse leadership coach and business strategist with over 20 years steering top companies and boards. He's transformed organizations worldwide, and his new book that we're going to talk about today, The Buy-in Advantage, is set to revolutionize how leaders inspire their teams. Get ready for some game-changing insights. Welcome, Dave.
Jason, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I want to get right into it because your book kind of revolutionizes the way that we look at how we as leaders deal with our employees. And we have a lot of startup, CEOs listen to this podcast and a lot of C-suite leaders. And you've been doing this for over 20 years. So what if the real reason employees stop caring isn't them, it's us? And how do we as leaders confront the uncomfortable truth that they might be the root of the buy-in crisis?
The answer to that is about an hour long. So let's take it in little pieces, Jason. So here's what I observe. We see human beings come into the office. They try to do their best. And the data shows year after year after year, they really are happy to be there. They appreciate the paycheck. They're nice. They'll do what you ask them to do. But fundamentally, they wouldn't really recommend your place as a place to work, and they really don't care. They're going through the motions. So It is not anybody's fault. It is a system that we've created. Everybody participates. It's not the boss's fault. They're trying to do the best they can. It's not the employee's fault. They're trying to do the best they can. But here is what I notice. If I look at an employee who shows up every day, is a hard worker, don't cause any problems, and you say good enough, and then ask them, hey, how much do you really care? Are you passionate about the work they're doing? The data shows most of the time the answer in the US, in England, in France, in Germany, in Spain, the answer is no. But I'm glad to get the paycheck. Here's the deal. If in the US on Friday night, I follow that employee to a high school football game, they are passionate and enthusiastic. If I ask them to participate in a PTA fundraiser, they're all over it. So the question is, how do we bottle up that passion and allow it to thrive in the workplace? What are we missing? And I don't believe it is leaders' fault. Leaders are working under old paradigms through no fault of their own. It's what they've been told to do. It's the behavior they've seen modeled. And that behavior does not play in today's environment, which creates a huge competitive advantage for entrepreneurs or C-suite people who are willing to recognize, hey, the competitors don't get this. But if I can apply some simple but not obvious tools and techniques, I'll have a competitive advantage. And that's what the Buy-in Advantage book is about. It's nothing you're going to go, wow, that's really amazing. I would have never considered this in a million years. It's, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I can do this. And it really costs nothing except for authentic intentions and time. These techniques cost nothing.
So you're saying it's kind of the old paradigms, but when I talk to leaders, a lot of them blame external factors like generational shifts, like the millennials, they never work, they don't do anything, or economic disruptions. We're experiencing a little blip right now. What do you say to those leaders that want to blame external factors?
Yeah, I think if you go back to 2 generations of leaders ago, they said the same thing about you. It's this generation. They don't want to work, blah, 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 blah. What we observe, and these are generalizations, but what we observe is that each generation has a different slant on values and what's important to them. So Generation Z, which is really coming in and starting to take over the workforce, is money important? Absolutely, money is important. As important is having impact and being heard. And for millennials, values alignment, having impact, being heard is also important. So what do we do in our systems? We treat people like human doings, not human beings. We just say, okay, here's some work I need you to do. Okay, how's that project going? And it's like they're not people, they're doings. And so we don't have the simple techniques like collective genius to really gather people's experience and ask them to participate and co create with us. Because frankly, as a leader, I wasn't given those tools. When I was a CEO, it was kind of like, you're a CEO, you make decisions, you have more experience than they do, you tell them what to do, which is great. It's really important if there's a fire in the workplace or a chemical emergency, tell them what to do. Otherwise, it's an opportunity to say, here's what we're trying to achieve. Let's talk about what criteria makes that great, and let's brainstorm together and come up with the very best thinking instead of being limited by the leader's own experience. Yeah. No, go ahead.
You use an esoteric word, the co-create. We kind of look at it that way. What do you mean when you say co-create? That seemed very powerful to me.
Yeah, let me tell you a story about story in the book about a great leader who's an unassuming guy. He's not the cheerleader guy, but he's very thoughtful. And his name is Jeff Edison, and he's CEO of a company called Phillips Edison, and they happen to be the largest operator of grocery-anchored shopping centers in the country and billions of dollars of assets under management, and they're very, very successful. And I'm facilitating one of their senior team meetings after a board meeting, and Jeff is a little bit late coming from the board meeting. He comes in, and about 8 of us are sitting around this beautiful room, and Jeff says, "Hey, before we get started, I wanted to share something with you. I'd like to bring another member onto the senior team." And I look at the faces of the senior executives sitting around the room, and they all look kind of confused or like, what's the matter with us? And so I said, wait a minute, Jeff, have you given this a lot of thought? And I knew ahead of time he'd given a lot of thought because that's how he rolls. And he said, yes, I have. And I said, okay. And I said, do you have somebody in mind? He said, yes, I do. I said, before you tell us that person, would you please tell us what was on the checklist in your head that allowed you to know this was the right person? And Jeff thought about it for a minute and he listed out a couple of things. It's somebody who has a lot of cred in the organization. They work hard. They think differently than the existing players in this room. And I said, okay, cool. And then I said to the team, I want you to take a minute on your own and I want you to list out what additional criteria you would look for if you were asked to add somebody to this team. And the team thought about it for a minute and they added another 5 criteria. And I said, okay, so now the desire is to add somebody to the team. We have a checklist to evaluate any potential candidates for that. Now I want you to brainstorm who fits these criteria. Gave them 5 minutes and they started shouting out names. And they had about 8 different names. And I said, okay, cool. So we've identified where it is we want to go. We've identified the criteria that great looks like. So we ask the question all the time, what does great look like? And then they brainstorm names. So then I turned back to Jeff and I said, so Jeff, do you want to tell us who it is? Which is kind of a risky question to ask a CEO who's writing your check. But Jeff said, no. Do you know what? This is really good. I want to think about it some more. And so that is a great example of co-creation. And what it took was a humble attitude from the CEO or a team lead or whomever to say, you know what, I have some pretty good thinking and my thinking will get even better when I tap into others' thinking. Here's what happens too often. I'm guilty of this myself. You come back from a seminar or a meeting, or it's the weekend and you're out walking your dog and you have some great idea. And you come in Monday morning and you say, Jason, I've got a great idea for what we can do. So, and then you describe your idea and you say, what do you think? Well, you kind of leave people in a weird position. They've got to say, oh, that's a great idea. And then they'll ask some questions around the periphery. But that doesn't serve the organization, and that's not co-creation. That's what we call done to, not done with in the book. So here's how to flip that model, because I did do a lot of thinking that got me to that great idea. So we say to leaders to be highly effective, to create buy-in, back up your thinking and ask yourself, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? Be really clear about that. And then ask yourself, how do you know that your great idea is a winner? How do you know it's great? And your mind will say, oh, it's great because it meets this, this, and this criteria. Then go back to your team and say, team, I would like to do some thinking about this problem, this output. And I've given it some thought already, and I have a couple of criteria I'd like to share with you. Would you please think about what criteria you would add? And then after they have a chance to contribute, then say, okay, let's co-create, let's brainstorm together. And one of the principles in the book that we really believe strongly in, leaders go last, except when it comes to vulnerability. So the leader is not going to blurt out their idea first. The leader will go last. But you get all the best ideas on the table. And you know what? Most of the time, the idea that it finally emerges as the winner is some combination or spurred on by some idea offered up by a team member. So that's what
Yeah.
I mean about co-create.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that last principle you said. We've all heard people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses.
Yeah.
But what if they're not leaving at all? And you talked about this in the very first 5 minutes, but they're just quietly disengaging. Well,
Yeah.
they're still on the payroll.
Yeah.
How do leaders spot the invisible exodus?
Yeah. Hey, Jason, good morning. How you doing? Hey, how are the kids? Cool. It's the good fake. And then they go and they just do whatever and they're thinking about something else. And so there are 8 common warning signs that we talk about in chapter 3. And it's everything from what is obvious, like sales decreasing or customers leaving, key talent leaving, key talent. I'll come back to that in a second. Or it's meetings starting late, meetings running over. It's people being unclear on what it is they're supposed to do. Those are common warning signs. But let me tell you, good talent leaving. What happens when a good talent leaves? They come into you hat in hand and say, listen, Jason, I really appreciate the opportunity you gave me here. I love it here. And unfortunately, I'm going to pursue another opportunity. It's a better job and I couldn't say no. And you'd say, what could we have done? There's really nothing you could have done. And that's what in the book, a friend of mine who's vice chairman of a big investment bank calls the greatest lie ever told. And it's, I'm leaving for a better job. And what they're really leaving for is because they didn't have their needs met by your organization. And having their needs met, for example, for Gen Zs is, do I have an impact? Do my opinions count in how we get things done around here? For millennials, it's my voice is heard, the time worth it, the time is worth it. So the time it takes that I'm not doing other things, the time it takes I'm commuting in is worth being there. And that's where, boy, the leaders who get this concept can have a field day because organizations are saying, you've got to be in the office, as if being in the office is a great thing. And we have ways in the office to run effective meetings, which most companies don't. It's in the book, how to run effective meetings so they don't waste time. The processes aren't there. And for a lot of employees, they don't really interact with other people. So what's the benefit of being in the office? The opportunity is you can offer a flex approach to work unless you really have to have somebody there all the time. And there's some jobs like on the factory floor, they've got to be there, but you can offer a flex and have a competitive advantage just because you give people a choice.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. And I know a leader's mind right now is thinking, I don't have enough time. How am I going to not only spot the disengagement, but how do I, because I've had this before as a leader. So you're going to be teaching me as long as our audience here, because that's the first thing I'm thinking of is, because I've had A-list people leave underneath me, and I've recognized because I didn't give them the leeway. I was what a lot of times I ended up doing was I was giving them other tasks that other people weren't doing, and I was making them do it because I knew they would get it done. And it created a lot of these superstars. They would leave just for the simple fact is, this guy's not a good leader. He can't get these other people to work, but he's just throwing everything on me. So how do I engage people to make sure that they're not, being fake, like you said?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted question. And let me take it from 2 different aspects. One is about time and one is about delegation. So, the idea of I don't have time is one of those great lies being told, like I left for a better job. The fact is you have the same amount of time I do. You have a choice in what you're prioritizing in the time. So the real question is, what am I prioritizing? And are those the most impactful things? And how much time am I investing in people and leadership? If you do not have time to invest in your people or your leaders, then I guarantee you'll have time to do a lot of interviewing and a lot of sourcing and pay more money for somebody else. So you've created this environment that you then have to pay the price because you, quote unquote, didn't have time. So I think the opportunity is to say, wait a minute, I've got all the time I need. It's my job to prioritize what it is I'm going to get done. Then the second part is delegation. I can tell you all the excuses, and I've practiced some myself, about why we don't delegate. It's faster to do myself. They can't do it as well as I can, etc. But the reality is there should be only a short list of things that you, the leader, have to do because they're important and you are truly the best at doing it. And then everything else is an opportunity for delegation, which people really appreciate because when you delegate to somebody, you're saying to them, I trust in you. And you know what? They may not get it right the first time, but it is so worth your time. When you delegate effectively, you create time for yourself. And we'll go into a room of 100 CEOs and we'll say, who has time to get to the really important stuff? And no hands will go up because we've all got so much to do. But you create your own capacity when you take the time to prioritize delegation. And that's going to make people feel better because if you just give it to the superstars, you're sending a message to the rest of your losers. Yeah, I appreciate you being around and I'm going to give you an attaboy, but it's the superstars who are going to get stuff done around here. And that's not fair to anybody, including the leader.
That makes so much sense. I want to dig into a little bit of a piggyback what you just said on the psychology of leadership avoidance. So why do you think leaders cling to perks? We see this. They have sleep pods and free baristas and ping pong tables and gaming, all this. We've seen all of this. When the data shows that those things are irrelevant, is it just because we're afraid to face what employees really want? Or is it kind of like the disengaged parent that just buys things for the kid? What do you think it is, Dick?
Yeah, I could tell you the greatest predictor of an engaged employee is their engaged boss. And I could tell you that the mass disengagement of US workers, so mass lack of buy-in is because their bosses, the middle manager level, the supervisor level aren't engaged. And that's our biggest opportunity. And you know what? If you gave me a choice between writing a check for a ping pong table or a barista or free pizzas on Friday, that's an awful lot easier than doing the work of taking the time to listen, to say, all right, middle managers, I really need to know what's working around here and what's not working around here. What is it we could address and truly have the conversation and go through the process, which is outlined in the book, on how to co-create a different environment to address the core issues. And don't address them all at once. Just start with the one that we can impact the quickest, that will have the biggest impact, and then allow other people to do it. Here's one of my pet peeves. Companies do employee surveys. Let's say we hire Gallup, who are the gold standard of the 12 questions, and they do a great job. And year after year, Gallup says people don't care. People don't care. It hasn't changed for 20 years. People don't care. It goes up 36% net promoters, 33%, but they don't care. Here's what a lot of companies do. They'll say, well, we'll do that survey and find out where we are. And then a leader said to me the other day, you know what? We got thousands of comments back on our survey. So I made the executive team sit down and read every single comment. And then we came up with a plan to address their concerns, which is a very logical thing to do. The problem is the people who know the solutions are the people who took the survey, not the people reading the answers.
Hmm,
You know?
good.
So in the book, we talk about a company, very successful medical device manufacturing company that competed for labor with General Electric, who ran a factory down the road. And one of the things that came back on the survey was, I am not paid fairly for the kind of work I do. I am not paid fairly for the kind of work I do. And I said to the leaders, what do you think that's about? And honestly, I was baiting them, I admit. And they said, oh, we know what it's about. And I said, oh, tell me. They said, oh, it's about General Electric. And I said, what about General Electric? And they said, well, they're down the street 3 miles away and they pay a higher starting wage and have better benefits. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I'll tell you what, why don't we do some small group meetings with your employees? Yes, it takes time. Let's meet in groups of 5 or 6 and ask people, what do they think people were thinking about when they answered the question the way they did? That's different than what did you say, right? So what they found out was the overtime schedules for the weekend were being announced on Thursdays. And employees said, I made a commitment to my kids' ball game. I was going to take my family on a picnic. We already had plans. And I found out on Thursday I have to work Saturday. You can't pay me enough to do that. So unfair pay was not about starting wage, was not about wages at all. It was about cutting into my commitments to my family, my values. And that's not okay. So the leaders were then able to go, okay, get to the root of the problem. We are not planning far enough in advance. And they changed that. So today they announce the overtime schedules at least 10 days in advance. So employees can make a plan for their life. So the answers are not always what leaders think they are. The people who know the answers and what to do about it are the people who took the survey. And you know what? People like to be asked if you're going to do something about it. If you're going to read the survey and you determine what it means, don't even do the survey. Don't waste the time because you're not mind readers. You're smart, you care, you're not mind readers.
That's so good. In your book, you talk about that buy-in is the advantage. I kind of want to paint a picture. We're having some huge, and you're on the forefront of this and seeing all this, we're having some huge shifts with technology, as we always do, I think, every, 10 years. But what's the disadvantage of ignoring buy-in? Can you kind of paint a picture of what a company would look like 5 years from now if leaders don't act now?
Yeah, and acting is a choice. You don't have to do anything. But what I can tell you is that finding talent will be much more challenging. I can tell you because, let's talk about restaurant reviews. I don't know about you, but when I go to I don't know every restaurant in St. Louis and they change so often. When I go to St. Louis, I go to Google reviews or I go to ChatGPT and I say, here's the kind of food, here are the stars, here's the price point, here's the geography, where do I want to go? And I rely on local people to tell
Mhm.
me. I'm not relying on the advertising or the billboard that the restaurant put up. So, likewise, if your employees do not have a great feeling about where they are and working for you, you're not going to get great employees because any employee with half a brain will talk to people who are there and say, what's it like? And they're going to go, stay away. So, if you decide not to address the buy-in advantage and just let things slide, what you'll find is great talent continues to leave, that people are doing less and they're showing up later. You'll see sick hours going up. You're going to see customers start to drift away. You'll see customer satisfaction slip and you'll see profits going down. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. But the buy-in advantage is such a low bar because your competitors aren't doing it. So why not take advantage of it? Gallup says companies that have higher level of engagement, have higher customer service ratings, have more profits, have better safety records. Who wouldn't want that? But it takes leaders to make a commitment to it as opposed to eyewash. And so one question I'd ask is, if you're in a company of more than, say, 100 employees, where is turnover in your weekly discussions? When you do your performance review of your leaders, where is turnover and where is employee absenteeism in doing a review, just as two really simple proxies? And do you do employee surveys? And how do you use that data? And how do you then go back to employees to say, can you tell me more about this?
That's so good. In your book, you talk about 7 ingredients for a buy-in culture. What do you think's the number one ingredient most leaders get wrong? And why do you think it sabotages everything else?
Yeah, there's a saying in the book that the companies with a buy-in advantage live into the belief that all of us are smarter than any of us. All of us are smarter than any of us, which means nobody has the corner on the best answers. And the leader's job is as much to facilitate and share experience as to give answers, probably more to facilitate and share experience. That's different than telling people what they ought to do. If you hire fully formed human beings, as Patty McCord says, then they know what to do. If they know what the objective is and what the criteria is, they can come up with some pretty good solutions. So let's apply all of us are smarter than any of us to a simple thing like employee reviews. I don't know about you. I dread employee reviews because I feel like I have to pick out a couple things you're really doing well, and then that long list of things you aren't doing well, and then say you're really great, and then say, but that doesn't result in a raise. So here's some feedback. And it's like we're doing it for lawyers. We're not doing it for us or the employee. The lawyers make us do it. And that's crazy. What if instead all of us are smarter than any of us? What if we said to the employee, hey, are we really clear on what great looks like in your position? Are we really clear on the measures we're using to measure success? If those things have been in place for a period of time, then say to the employee, I would like you to come back and I would like you to evaluate how your performance has been. What's going really well? What do you have the opportunity to work on? How can I support you? And what questions do you have? And oddly enough, the employee will have done probably 80% of the conversation that needs to be done. And if you find an area that they did not bring up, you can ask, I'm curious how you have experienced blank. Because you know what? Unless you're with them every minute of the day, you really don't know very much about their performance except the output. And their output could be the result of they're waiting for things from other departments. They didn't have the proper training. Their colleagues have told them and agreed to prioritize other things. You don't know, but they know. And so all of us are smarter than any of us is. Let's tackle stuff together, like the Jeff Edison example before. Let's do a review together. And you can review me as well. I can let me know how to serve you.
That's so good. It reminds me of there was a NASA leader I read in a leadership book, and he asked a question similar to what you just asked. But he would ask employees, what are they an expert in, or what are they extremely passionate about that we're not doing or using? You know,
Yeah.
and he said it was so amazing to see the answers and how it could, they would they would almost like create a whole new job role, or they would turn around and they would add to, they would want to do more work. So is that like when you ask that question, because we always hear about, and I practice coaching and I take time and I make sure I sit down and and what next and why, and going through, let's be friends while here for 30 minutes doing this coaching session. Are you talking about kind of that? Like, what is this a hybrid? Like, what's going on here with this question asking?
Yeah, so one other example comes to mind. You could say to people, are you clear? Do you understand what we just talked about after you lay something out?
Oh, that's good. Yes.
The answer to that is what? The answer is yes. I am not an idiot. I am clear. That doesn't create any understanding. You have no idea what's going on. A two-way handshake is critical to conversations where important information is being conveyed. So we would say to leaders, instead of saying, are you clear? Do you have any questions? Yes, I'm clear. No, I have no questions. Because in the person's mind, the receiver end, they are absolutely clear. A very different question is, hey, let me be humble here. Sometimes I don't explain stuff really well. Would you do me a favor? Take a second and then tell me back what you've heard. What does great look like? What are the measures? And what's to be done by when? And what they tell you back is their understanding. Instead, what happens is we say, "Hey, I need you to do this, and here's the way. Here's how I want it done, kind of." And got any questions? Nope. You come back a couple of weeks later and you say, "Hey, how you doing with that?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, I think I did it." And you realize it's not done the way you intended, or they didn't get to it because you didn't set it up correctly, and that's your fault, not their fault. So double checking in on that handshake is one of the most important communication tools for leaders. I'm not sure that got your question though.
Yeah, yeah, the clarity part, I love that, and we've all used that. That's clarity, clarity, clarity. You're saying when you're asking them for clarity, you're specifically having them, yeah, here's the KPI, here's what we're gonna do, or here's the one thing, however that plays out in your culture. And then if they repeat that and it's pretty good, like this is pretty much what I was thinking. What happens when somebody gets super excited about something or is engaged, but it's kind of off topic or it's not something that you may be interested in? because that's what happens in that moment. And we're trying to create buy-in because in my mind as a leader, I'm going through your book and going through everything. And I'm like, okay, do I let someone go on for 10 minutes about something that they don't fully understand and now they're off in this tangent? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we need to do is honor their good intent. They're going off in that direction because they believe that's the right thing to do. Because
Mhm.
I believe if a person is sane, that what they say and do is always in line with their beliefs. And so I think if you feel like they're way off track, you have the opportunity to politely interrupt and just say, "Hey, Jason, I'm not sure I'm tracking here. Can you help me relate what you're talking about now to whatever it is we started with?" And if there isn't a connection, then you can say, "Do you know what? That sounds like it's worthy of a conversation. Can we go back to what we were talking about and put this on a list? And we'll tackle it at our next session." So honor it, validate their right to have that belief, but move back to what we're talking about that's important.
Yeah, that sounds good. I want to get into what the most surprising thing you've seen from a leader. Something unconventional that may have, in all these years of experience that flipped the disengaged team into a powerhouse of buy-in.
Yeah, boy, there are a lot of different examples, but I will tell you about two brothers who are mentioned at the very end of the book. And unfortunately, their dad was a hard charging CEO and told everybody what to do and how to do it. And it was yes, sir, no, sir. And they had no disagreements because they were just doing what dad said. Unfortunately, dad passed and they had very different ideas on what to do. And they fought all the time. And the team learned to sit back and watch the fights. And disengagement set in and it got worse and worse. And one of the brothers was talking to a neighbor that I worked with, and the neighbor said, "Call Dave." And so the brother called me one day. I'll never forget this. I was in a Delta Airlines club, and he called and said, "I don't know if you can do anything for us." He said, "But my brother and I are fighting, and we're going to have to sell the company or the company's going to fold because we can't see eye to eye." And basically, he's not right because, and then all the reasons that the other brother wasn't right. And I said, "Okay, are you willing to have open and honest conversations? Are you willing to try things differently?" And they both were, which frankly kind of surprised me. And we sat down and gave them tools to validate one another's experiences. Because what would happen is one would say, "Well, you remember when you did this? You were really a jerk." And it was everything that they quoted that the other person did wrong. It was filled with judgment, not curiosity. One of the key ideas in the book is judgment and curiosity cannot coexist. So if you're
Mm.
judging, you can't learn. And so we gave them the tools to be curious. "Hey, you know when this happened? It didn't really strike me the right way. What was going on for you? What were you trying to achieve there? Because I didn't really get it." And give the person the opportunity and then validate. You know what? Validate does not mean agree, by the way. Validate is validate. So, you know what? If I had been through what you've been through and seen the world that way, I probably would have done the same thing. That's what validation looks like. They build these muscles of communication so that today the company has made its largest sale, is achieving record results. People are glad to be around them and they don't agree about everything. That's not the point. The point is they respectfully disagree and honor each other's experiences. And the results show. And so
Mhm.
that's the biggest turnaround that, frankly, when I came into it, I thought, man, these stories are so old. Do you remember when you were a kid and mom did this? And it's like, oh man, I got a lot of work to do. They did an amazing job and turned it around.
Yeah, that's crazy. You said something that's super gold and powerful, and I want us to kind of open it up a little, open this beautiful gym box up. You said, if you're judging, you're not learning. There's so many C-suite people, and I fell into this thing too, where we're just like, F this, let's go. I can't believe these people, our meetings turn into, just all judging. And then, screw them, we're gonna do this and we're moving fast. And you've heard that and seen that.
Yeah.
If we're judging, we're not learning. Talk to me more about that. I want to learn.
Yeah, just the way the human brain works. So this is a protective judgment is a protective mechanism. So if you go way back in time, imagine we're back in the old days in Africa, and we're in the jungle, and we see a field over there, and the top of the wheat starts to shake, we're not going to wait around to see if that's a lion or not. We're going to get out of there. That judgment saves our life. We're going to judge is the situation safe? And if we don't perceive it as safe, we're going to get out of the way. So we are trained for judgment because it keeps us alive. And it works against us in conversations and understanding and learning. And the way that works is when people say things, many times we're analyzing it and coming up with our response while they are talking. We're coming up with our response. And so many times we have no idea what they're saying. Let me give you an example. We'll get together with groups. So say we have 20 leaders in a room. We'll ask them, so you guys are all smart. I'm going to use the word chair in a sentence. Will you please write down on a piece of paper what I mean by chair? And we'll hear 20 different descriptions of a chair. Is that the electric chair? Is it the chair at grandma's table? Is it the chair of the board? Is it what do I mean by chair? We all have different meanings. And so if we respond to what I said before we understand what chair means, we don't have a chance. So our mind is wired to judge to keep us safe. In business conversations or human conversations or personal relationships, it is the worst thing, and in fact creates conflict. And so what I'd say is, let's go, let's go, let's go. It's in the book, we say one of the principles, slow down to speed up. Slow down to speed up. Make sure what we're doing is the best option because we went through the collective genius process criteria and identified the best option and then agreed on how we're going to do it and who's going to do what by when and what resources they need. Then let's go, not let's go. But the conversation of curiosity is, hey, Jason, can I tell you back what I heard? So this is the flip side of asking people what they heard you request and what the measures are. This is, can I tell you what I heard? And you be real and try to repeat as faithfully as you can what it is you heard them say, because that will help begin to train us to take the translator out of our brain and get our story out of it. And that is surprisingly challenging to do because we're so quick to make meaning of what people say. And when we get what they say, then we can say, hey, can I have a question? What did you mean when you said chair? And when I have an understanding of what other people mean, then we can begin a conversation. But the biggest issue is I assume I know what you mean, when in fact, I don't have your experience. I haven't been where you've been. I haven't had the failures and the victories you've had. So I actually have no idea what you mean. I know my interpretation of the words you're using because I'm using my version of the words, but we have no understanding. And so that room where we get all fired up and say, let's go, is the worst place to be. And that's where you want the voice to say, what if we didn't go?
That's so good. That's really good. There's an elephant in the room when it comes to this, and certain personalities I think would have an aversion to what you're talking about and building a culture of buy-in, and that is the fear of vulnerability. That scares the shit out of some leaders.
Yeah.
And some personalities, some people are just naturally open and they give hugs. Then some people are like, we got to look at the optics, let's run this through PR and make sure everything, every word, we're going to be on CNBC, we're going to have these talking points and I need them, ahead of time. What's this fear of vulnerability? Is it as bad as we think it is? Do we need to be as politically correct as we think we need to be as a leader? How do we address this?
Yeah, I think that fear of vulnerability is a really solid and very real fear. Who wants to look stupid? Raise your hand. I don't want to look stupid. But if you can just be honest with people, when you say things like, you know what, I'm going to try something new. It may not be perfect. Would you roll with me? Can we try this together? That's a vulnerability that's a very human, authentic vulnerability. And people will open up. And the secret about um, high trust organizations. High trust organizations produce so much more, have better output, better buy-in. High trust organizations require people to be vulnerable. And the vulnerability isn't because you put out a memo saying in an email, okay, attention, we're going to really work on vulnerability. I want you guys to be vulnerable. It starts because the leader is vulnerable. And that's as simple as saying, look, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but what I think is really important here is that we achieve X. I'm really open to your ideas and I want to get your input. That's vulnerability that doesn't say I'm stupid. It says, I'm going to be honest about what you already know. I don't have all the answers. And if you think I have all the answers, shame on you.
Yeah, that's good because I think when we think of vulnerability, we think of weakness, and honesty can
Strength.
even be presumed as weakness, if that
Right.
makes sense.
It's actually strength. It's strength to recognize all of us are smarter than any of us. That's strength. And it says, I'm willing to have my idea and my thinking get even better because I take on your idea. That's the difference between walking in saying, hey, everybody, I've got this great idea. What do you think? That's the opposite of vulnerability. That's, I don't really care what you think. That's, I want you to reinforce how smart I am. Yes, boss, you are really smart. And that doesn't improve your thinking. It doesn't improve results. And it's not the intention of the boss. The boss is just trying to do a better job, but it does not come across as, hey, would you join me on this journey?
Yeah, that I like that. If you had to boil it down, and we all love hacks and like quick fixes and do this and you're all good. If you had to boil it down, what's the one question every leader should ask their team tomorrow? So they're going to a meeting tomorrow to start reversing the buy-in crisis.
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about in the book is doing a survey, and there are a couple of different ways to do this survey. But the management by walking around, whether it's virtual or in person, is always powerful. And ask people what they're working on. Hey, really curious to know, what are you working on? What's important right now? And then ask them, how do you see that tying to our purpose? And get the understanding of, do they get the purpose? And ask, hey, there's a lot of talk here around values. I'm curious to know, what values do you see at play in our company? And listen to whether or not the values are known. And you get the same answer. There's a questionnaire in the book that we encourage you to give to your leadership team that is an assessment of how effective we are as an organization, and then compare answers. So start with the leadership team and ask the leadership team, go through the book together and ask the leadership team, identify where should we start? What's a great idea we can apply right away? And ask the team. But it's asking questions of the people in the front line. It's asking people about purpose and values, and it's asking your team to do a common analysis and then discuss the results together to create buy-in, because buy-in cascades, buy-in cascades. And if all we're asking about are metrics and where are you on this objective and have you done this project and look, I'm in a hurry, I guarantee you're not going to have buy-in. You're going to have agreement, or what one of my clients calls donkey head. Happy here. Thanks, boss. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Why do you think most people avoid this buy-in and this crisis of buy-in that we have? Why do you think most leaders avoid it?
Because I've got too much to do and it doesn't show up in my P&L. It doesn't show up in my metrics, and the board doesn't ask me about it. My boss doesn't ask me about it. We just take it as a given. It's invisible, and I've already got plenty to do, Jason. I don't need more to do. I got plenty to do. So I'll get to it when I get around to it. It's good enough. Don't worry about that. We'll get to it. And the thing is, you will get to it. The way you'll get to it is in doing interviews, endless interviews to replace valuable talent, going out on sales calls to replace the customers you lost. It's to repair damage to your reputation in the marketplace. You'll be doing it. You'll just be chasing after it as opposed to getting ahead of it. So the real question is, do you believe your role as a leader is to create an organization that builds sustainable value through what people believe about purpose, align values about how we get stuff done, and how we co-create to get everyone's best thinking on what we do?
Yeah, that's so good. And I know, you've seen companies thrive. You've seen them, go down to nothing. You've seen them thrive. What's the secret sauce that those leaders have, these companies that are booming that you've seen? What's the secret sauce, that they have that the rest of us are missing?
Boy, that is so company and industry dependent on what their secret sauce is. But I can tell you, as a leader, the secret sauce, I would say two attributes. One would be humble. One would be curious. A third would be authentic. When you can put humble, curious, and authentic together, people can't wait to help you and work with you. It allows you to hear customers, your ability to be humble and tell back what you think you've heard to make sure you got it right. People will go through walls to help you, whether they are customers or suppliers or team members, if you exhibit those three characteristics.
That's so good. Dave, you've been a CEO and you've coached thousands. From a personal standpoint, what's the one belief about leadership that you had to unlearn?
I had to have the answers. I have a Harvard MBA. I'm really smart. I've done all these things. I must have the answers. And I do have ideas, but ideas are not the answers. And I had to unlearn that. I had to unlearn it big time.
That's so good. Dave, I want to get into your website, the book that's coming out. I want to make sure everybody understands and knows that what the book's coming out in a couple weeks. Can you share a little bit about what drove you to write the book, one, and then a little bit about your company and your website?
Yeah, what really drove me to write the book, this is a book about 7 years in the writing, to be honest with you. And it's, Mark Twain was so true. Samuel Clemens, when he said, I apologize for writing this 5-page letter. I didn't have time to write a 1-page letter. And a book, if this is, and I hope that people find it useful. If they find it useful, it's the result of the thousands of words on the floor that you never read. But I have a passion to unleash potential. My driving force is to unleash potential in individuals and in teams. And I don't think it's that hard to do. Like you alluded to earlier, everybody has potential. Our job as leaders to figure out what their God-given gift is, and then how to apply it to the situation, how to create an environment that encourages them to achieve potential. And so the buy-in advantage is the result of what I've learned from other leaders and what I know from personal experience. And to be honest with you, it's the book I wish I had when I started my leadership journey. Because if I had known these things, I would have done it differently. And they're going to be people who turn up, who get on the web page and they go, wait a minute, that wasn't what Dave did when he was my leader, because I didn't know all this stuff. But it's been gleaned from what works for others and what I know from the research about today's environment and what workers are looking for, which really changed after COVID. Values really changed and what people are looking for from work. So the work that our company does is the work of working with individuals and leadership teams to unlock potential. And we do that through both leadership workshops. We do it through strategic planning sessions. So we have a strategic planning system called Strategic Alignment and Accountability System. Keywords, alignment, keyword, accountability. That is a formula that's easy to implement that allows every voice to be heard so we can easily and simply prioritize. We see too many companies that we ask, what's your strategy? And they pull out a list and it's like 10 things. You can't have 10 strategies. We say 3 is greater than 7. 3 is greater than 7. When we get the 3 done, we'll get to the next 3, but let's get done 3 at a time. So our company's work is really about this passion of unleashing potential. So it's workshops, you come to us, it's custom workshops, it's keynote addresses, it's working with companies on strategic planning. If you want somebody in your company to lead the strategic planning, we'll train you how to be a facilitator in strategic alignment and accountability systems. So that's what our company does. And our website has some tools there that will help you get going in terms of questionnaires and more about us and more about the options, because the experience is different for the C-suite than it is from the middle manager, than it is for the brand new manager.
That's so good. And what's the website, Dave? The address?
Yeah, the website is www.garrisongrowth.
And we'll have the links in the bio, and also we'll have the book in the bio too. One of the things I want to say, and we'll close on this, Dave, is I so appreciate you taking the time. I mean, 7 years, that's a lot. And I know you wrote the book specifically to help leaders. It's kind of that next leaving the legacy, that is amazing. And I appreciate you taking the time to do that and giving us a manual that we didn't have. That's such a huge way to serve others. And I know you're doing that in your zone of genius. And so I just want to, commend you all the golden nuggets. I mean, we've got clip after clip after clip of things that we can share that provides tons of gold to leaders. So I just want to commend you and thank you for leaving a legacy for leadership, because it's so much needed nowadays, as it has always been.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, a book that really influenced me is by the man who founded Textron Industries, everything from E-Z-Go golf carts to Bell helicopters. He wrote a book called How I Lost $100 Million. And I thought, That's a bizarre.
I've never read that. I have to read it.
It's in very limited print. But he says in the foreword, he said, look, I started with one bankrupt textile mill in Providence, Rhode Island, if I remember correctly. And he said, I can tell you how great I am. I can tell you all the great deals I did. I can tell you how wonderful I am. None of it applies to you because you'll never face those same situations again. So the book is not about, here's what I do. Here's what I do. The book is about, here's what I've learned. And here are proven techniques that work because I've seen them work. And Royal said, you're going to learn from one story in every chapter on how I screwed stuff up. And I realized Royal was willing to share things that people can apply to themselves. And I can't teach a leader all these techniques that will work in every situation. I can teach them how to be curious, how to suspend judgment, how to become more self-aware, and how to be inclusive of others to create the buy-in advantage.
That's so amazing. And once again, we'll have the link down below, and we encourage all our listeners pick up that book and do it immediately. Do it now. Let's support Dave and what he's got going on. So thank you, Dave, for
Get your
being.
team to talk about it. Get them to compare notes. Learn from them.
Yeah, I want to see the comments below, guys, on how it's helped you guys. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Jason, thanks so much.